Wonderful. Welcome everyone to Friday Facts. So excited to have everyone here on our second show of 2024. Thrilled to get started. I realize I also wanted to do a shout out. We are so close to February, which means we're close to two more Friday Facts and our monthly meeting in February. And February is Black History Month, so we wanted to even have some extra special programs. Make sure to tune in on February 9th. We have Kenya Servia, who's actually on with us today from the North Carolina Health Information Exchange. I hope I said that right. And then on February 23rd, I'm looking down, we have Daryl Fulmer with the North Carolina Governmental Employees Retired Employees Association. I'm sorry, I just said that wrong. She's also running part of our all ages, all stages work for North Carolina. And then sorry, I have my little announcements. On February 16th is our monthly meeting, and we're going to have a special focus on Black history. We have a presentation with from Mary Williams Stover to talk about, I think it's the Center for Black Health and Equity. I'm doing that all without notes, so I hope I said that right. But I always want to do some shout outs, but let's get to today's program. So excited to have a longtime friend and colleague of mine, Carol Henderson, join us. Carol is going to share lots of great insights, but she has a wonderful introduction, and she'd probably be too humble to share all of this. So I would like to share that Carol is a writer, a teacher, and workshop leader who has taught writing in the United States, Europe, and the Middle East. She has published 2 memoirs, written wildly for magazines and newspapers for the past 25 years, and edited several memoirs and essay collections. Her first memoir, Losing Malcolm, A Mother's Journey Through Grief, back in 2001, was chosen as a must-read memoir by USA Today. She has also published farther along, The Writing Journey of 13 Bereaved Mothers. She has coached writers one-on-one and has helped many authors find publishers for their memoirs. We've spoken before, and she knows I have such a hard time saying the word memoirs. For over 20 years, Carol has led ongoing workshops and retreats for those living with grief and loss. She has trained support services staff all over the country and has written a supporting guidebook to integrate restorative writing into the hospice environment. He also leads ongoing creative nonfiction workshops, as well as writing workshops for those living with chronic illness. She teaches in medical centers, faith and civic communities, colleges, and retreat centers all over the country. Wow, I'm so glad I took the chance to read all that, because I don't know if we would gather all that, and also it allowed some more of our audience members to join us. But Carol, I know on paper, I know in person for many years, you're so wonderful and a great advocate, and we're so happy to have you here on Friday Facts.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed the radio program I did with you. I've enjoyed co-sponsoring events with you, people writing about grief and loss, something that you helped organize, and we've just known each other for a long time. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'm really impressed with all the work you do, Heather. I just don't know how you manage, but every time I tune into anything that you have offered, when I'm looking back over materials to see, well, how should I focus on what it is that I'm going to be doing with her on this Zoom or that radio interview, I just go crazy, because what you've offered has been so informative and so helpful to so many people. So thank you.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you there, because this is supposed to be all about loving on Carol morning, not loving on me, but let's love on the Serious Illness Coalition. I will say, and Jessica put it in the chat, because we have lots of great people that have tuned in. Please put your name and your organization, and feel free to put questions there. I have my own for Carol, but if you want to add things, I'll take a look at it throughout the session. But as we always like to do here, and yes, Carol referenced, she came on my radio show. 56 minutes was not enough for us, and I know 27 minutes is not going to be enough for us. So we're just going to be able to stay high level. But Carol, give us a sense of your background. We always like to ask people a little bit about what experiences shaped them and brought them to the work they're doing today.
Okay, well, I will say that ever since I was a teenager, I have kept journals. So writing has always been an important component of my life. And it wasn't really until the life and death of my son in open heart surgery at Boston Children's Hospital that I began to um, really realize that maybe I had something to offer to others as a writer. So, um, and also it was during that time, and I think this could be, helpful information for people who deal with those who suffer from, really severe chronic illness, which I know is part of what we're talking about here today, that just the act of writing things down can be extremely helpful. And I actually, as usual, Heather, if you saw around me, I have tons of books and quotes and things, but I don't really think I have time to read any of that. But I would like to say one thing that what people are always saying, well, okay, this might be interesting for some people, but I can't write. The people I work with can't write. I really don't know how to write. But I just want to say one quote, which is that talking is writing on the air. If you can talk, you can write.
I
So
love that.
I think that's just an important thing for anyone to remember. Nobody ever has to see any of this writing that you do, or might not do. But I want to say that as a result of following my son around hospitals all over the Northeast, I just had to furiously write in my journal everything that happened. I wrote down what doctors said. I wrote down what was happening in the NICU next door, God forbid, as many of you you've probably worked with people, or maybe you've had these experiences yourself, what it's like, just the extreme trauma of being around illness. I wrote and wrote and wrote. And for me, that was just extremely helpful. It gave me a sense of agency in that at least I could write things down that were happening around me. And that makes me just have to read one tiny little thing, as long as I brought the book with me. Okay, this is a book called Writing as a Way of Healing, which I highly recommend to anyone who's working with people who are living with chronic disease. She says, as we write, oh, and her name is Louise DeSalvo. As we write, we become observers, an important component of developing resilience. Resilience is something I really care a lot about developing. We regard our lives with a certain detachment and distance when we view our life as a subject to describe and interpret. We reframe the problems in our life as challenges as we ask ourselves how to articulate what is on our mind in a way that will make sense. So, what I would really like to be doing with all of you, and what I really specialize in, is not talking about what I do, but actually doing it with people. Like, get out your pens, get out your paper, get out your laptop. Let's go ahead and get started on some really basic and good writing exercises that can help people begin to develop a little bit of distance even from their life experience. And that's one of the that's one of the great things about I find about the act of writing. um so this is just for a little bit of background. I'd like to say there was a man named James Pennebaker, a psychologist, who back in the 1980s began looking into how he seemed to sense that there was some value to writing about difficult issues in life. And he did an enormous amount of research. And now if you look into writing as a source of healing or writing for resilience, you will see hundreds of peer-reviewed, very scholarly, and actually, more designed for the layperson, articles about the value of writing. And he found, because he did quantitative research, he found that people who wrote about the most difficult aspects of their lives actually had lower pulse, lower blood pressure, increased T cell production. And I think, and there were some other things, were better able to deal with chronic pain And also, I think one of the most important aspects was they were able to have a slight shift in perspective on their lives. When things are just spinning around in our heads on and on and on, we think about them differently from how we think about things when we actually write them down. Our relationship to our own experience changes when we write it down. Interrupt me at any time,
Well,
Heather,
I
if
will
you
just
have
say,
a
first of
question.
all, thank you. You answered a few questions. My very first one, which was going to be my last one, is how do you get past the barrier, which I'm sure you hear all the time. I'm not a writer. I can't do it. I mean, I've already shared with you, I'm a multi-time failed journaler, but I love your point about what is it? Writing is just see, writing is talking and
Talking on the air,
you're
writing is
talking
talking.
on
So,
the air.
and listen, I don't, if you have, I don't know what kind of device anybody has, but if you have an iPhone or something that has a notes program on it, you could
Yes.
just every day, and I'm kind of, I don't know, I guess I'm talking to people who work with people who live with a lot of chronic illness, but this is something that you can do yourselves, and you can encourage practitioners and others who work with those with chronic illness. I mean, you can just do under notes every day, just a new day. Ask yourself, how I wrote down just a couple of things, these sentence stems, which I often use with people. Today I feel.
Yes.
Today I would like to finish the sentence. I wonder why. My disease is like blank, 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 some kind of simile. My disease is like a crashing, my disease is like a tornado, or my disease is a tornado. And then maybe you'd want to write about, well, what is a tornado, or how is my disease like a tornado? What does, and begin to kind of, I mean, I would say almost play with that, but and somebody would say, well, how presumptuous to even think you can play when you're that ill. Well, I have been that ill because I developed ulcerative colitis when I was in my early 30s, and I was very, very ill. Um, Hospitalized, came close to dying several times. So I can speak from my own personal experience about how writing actually helped me. Okay, granted, I already was familiar with writing, but just take it from me that even to just jot down or to write down, and I know a lot of people will like have an advocate with them to take notes on what's going on in a doctor's appointment. Write about what is going on in the room. How are you feeling? How are you responding? Just little notes. This doctor is making me feel I feel like a piece of dust in this room. Why? Or I wrote down a couple of other things. Let's see. And one important point to make is that, of course, writing is not a cure. There's no, we very often, I mean, there's no cure for the disease I had, although my doctor told me that there would be, and that, just to wait around a couple more years. Well, I almost died waiting around a couple more years for the cure for inflammatory bowel disease. They still don't have cures, but you can do things like writing a letter to my disease, writing a letter to, and these are obviously unsent letters, and you could write, I don't know where you'd mail a letter to your disease, but or writing a letter to a doctor about how I really feel about things. And I would say most of the time these would be unsent letters, or writing, and it depends on where you are. I've done a lot of work in hospice and with people who are dying, writing letters to my family members, or, what I want my legacy to be, what I want to leave behind in this world. And if you can't write, maybe you can dictate into your iPhone and somebody else can transcribe it for you. Or there are all kinds of services that you can use now that make getting your thoughts out of your head and onto the page, and maybe even a little, the most important thing is to help yourself with this kind of writing, but also if you share your writing. Oh, there's some Flannery O'Connor quote, which is, I'll probably get it slightly wrong, but she says, if you write, you might help other people
Mhm.
by sharing your writing, but you also might save yourself or something like that, you know. So there are other things like there's something called an acrostic. Now, Heather, tell me if I'm getting too
No,
specific.
no, no. This is great. Well, actually, and it's wonderful because you're going into one of the main things we wanted to talk about is what do we mean by writing for resilience? I love the term restorative writing. And then starting to go, this is wonderful, into examples about how the writing has helped in your own experiences. And then the writing you've done as part of your workshops with individuals with chronic illness, your workshops with hospice. So no, we want to hear all about
All right. And
how
I
you
just
use those
I wanted to
tools.
share some techniques that
Yes.
you know, you can find out more about. There's a wonderful book called The New Diary, which just is full of really good writing techniques. I not to self-promote, but you know, this book that I wrote, Farther Along the Writing Journey of 13 Bereaved Mothers, has a lot of prompts to help people get started writing about loss or grief. Um, and let's see what, so another exercise you could try, anybody can do this, like you could do it with your name, you could do it with the name of your disease, is something called an acrostic, which you might recognize from second grade, where you would write your name. Like I would
Yes.
write Carol, and then I would just write, you know, C, use that as the first. Can it be possible that I am actually a little girl who runs all over the place and can't sit down and always is the only child who seems to get into so much trouble because I laugh so much and talk, you know, that kind of thing. And you and
Love
what I want to focus on with this is that we learn. We can learn. Our bodies have a lot to teach us if we tune in and listen to them. You know, there's that book, The Body Knows the Score. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that book. I mean, he really talks about the body stores everything, the body holds everything, and the body can really inform us and therefore empower us so
it.
that we aren't just, you know, lying there on a gurney in a paper, in a, you know, a paper gown with a, you know, doctor hands all over us and feeling like we have absolutely no agency.
Yeah, and the
So
woe is me. I did want to share because I realized I want people to be able to find you after this, and you do have a website while we were talking about self-promoting, but no, I think you have great, clearly great lessons to share. Folks, very simple website, www.carolhenderson.com. So I
yeah,
threw that out there. And when you and I have spoken before, I'm so glad you added these prompts, the acrostic. I love sentence stems. You know, I love sentence stems because
yeah.
when people feel stuck and when you're in your workshops and people say, I don't know where to begin, just adding those sentence stems, I feel like I wonder, or I love the letter to my disease.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young people don't know how to write letters anymore, but or just an email to my disease, even if you want to make it. But you know, we do know how to say, to communicate something like that. I'm checking to see how we're doing on
Oh,
time.
no, 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 that's my
Oh,
job. We're good.
oh, that's your job. Okay. Well, I want to just
I'm driving.
driving. Hooray. I'm so used to being in the driver's seat. It's really nice to not be in the driver's seat. I just want to give another example of something. This is a book called, is it backwards to
No,
you?
no, I can see it. Winter morning walks.
Winter Morning Walks. Okay. This is a book by a wonderful poet by the name of Ted Kooser, who is just extraordinary. And he developed tongue and throat cancer and really thought he would never speak again, but he was such a humble poet. He said, oh, well, what difference does it make, you know, if I never give another reading or whatever? So he began, while he was in treatment, he began writing a postcard every day for like 6 weeks. He wrote a postcard to his best friend and put it in the mail, sent it to his best friend. It might just be like, perfectly still this solstice morning in bone cracking cold, nothing moving, or no one might think, but as I walk the road, the wind held in the heart of every tree flows to the end of each twig and forms a bud. That's one entry. So I'm, maybe even like a suggestion I would have for people is finding a partner with
Yes.
whom to just share. I mean, I was teamed up with someone when I was very sick with ulcerative colitis who had had this surgery that I ended up having. And she was someone I could call day or night and talk to. But, maybe you could find a way to, or someone you're working with could find a way to develop an exchange with, with someone, maybe even a slightly playful thing, like an actual postcard that goes through snail mail to a friend, or an email back and forth, or just someone you keep in touch with through writing every so often, even about how you are feeling, what's happening, or just even what you're noticing in the world that has nothing to do with your disease.
Well, I love that you put that suggestion out. I know for me, when I was going through all the craziness with the caregiving for my parents, while I don't journal, I was constantly texting, and I had these text groups. My sisters, my group of friends at in Chapel Hill, my group of friends at home, and I realized that texting was journaling.
Yeah,
Because
it
let me tell you
is.
what's going on today. This is crazy, or da da. And so I've often thought I want to go back and get that text thread, because that's what reminds me. Sometimes now I'll be looking for something and I'll go back through a text thread with a friend and I'll see those. So for me, that's exactly how it works. It's not an individual journaling, it's what I share, and then that becomes the archive of it. So
So,
I,
it is good to keep, you know, uh, to, well, and I don't know how you felt about that, but I imagine there was some kind of solace in being able to write that, and being able to, and being able to hear back from others. I think, texting is a wonderful example for this day and age, somebody that you can keep in, you can really, people who can, so that you can be heard,
absolutely.
and
And
you,
then you get the real time. Well, for me, you get the real time validation. I'm so sorry, or you're amazing, or go for it. I'm here with
yes,
my sisters now. They were like, everything you're doing is right. I was like, yay. So, I mean,
yeah,
sometimes
right.
there's that exchange. I did want to, since we have a few minutes left, one of the things I'd love to get your advice about is, as the North Carolina Serious Illness Coalition, we're always looking for new ways to connect and elevate voices and stories within the patients community, caregivers, providers, advocates. What suggestions might you have for us to help amplify voices and experiences? How might we connect with your work, or what have you found to be helpful? I know you have done collective experiences. It even turned into a book with
Yeah.
your group of bereaved mothers. But as the Serious Illness Coalition, and we're constantly trying to find new ways to raise awareness. And I'm wondering about this power of stories and storytelling, which we often talk about from a legislative perspective, but would love your insights.
Well, I mean, I think about some of the things that I have done, like, for 8 years, I offered a program at UNC Hospital once a week where people would come and and write for an hour. I'd give them two prompts and they'd write, and we would have, and this is, you need sort of people placed around to maybe help organize this, but this might give you some idea. We would occasionally have a public reading where we would invite people from all over the hospital to come and listen to what, people would pick something they had written, those who were brave enough, and they would read. So they would share with this much larger audience. Sometimes we even did this in bookstores. We would have, we had like 150 people show up to hear people read their illness narratives, or a response to a prompt or something like that. Now that's sort of me working, it's kind of like a more literary approach to
Actually,
it
I
all.
kind of like it. All of a sudden, I had a vision of a Serious Illness Coalition like poetry slam, or we have an event like Jessica. I see Jessica. Let's take notes. We have a lot of our members on here. Ooh, okay, keep going.
So that kind of, I mean, how, whatever vehicles that people have, like if there is some kind of a newsletter, include it, solicit writings from people who are involved. Say, hey, do you have something that you've written that you'd like to share about your experience? Or maybe it would be all video, maybe it would be all audio, or all, video. I'm not sure what different populations you're working with, but um, way, that's
Yes.
that just sort of that's what comes to mind immediately. And I'm not currently offering, I'm on a pause right now due to some medical situations within my own family. Not me for once, thank goodness. But so I don't see myself really being able to get involved. But I'll tell you that if you look, there have been a lot of, and Heather, I can dig up and send you some examples of different, it might be good to affiliate with a hospital or something, because they very often have
Mhm.
programs or have someone who is really, in doing marketing and outreach or whatever. They actually have journals that they put together of writings for people who are in the hospital. And
Well, and I'm gonna, you know what, I realize with just a few minutes, I'm gonna redirect us really quickly because I know you have other stories, which is as we think about, we just talked about, especially from the patient and the caregiver experience, when you and I spoke another time, we talked about the provider experience. And I'd love for you to say a few moments, especially since as I look at the audience here, we have folks that work with at academic health centers, we have folks that work in as educators with medical students and other health affairs students. What has been the advice or the work you have done as providers are reflecting on their work or making sense?
well, some of the same prompts and all that I have given before. I mean, my focus has really been much more on patient. I did talk to you about one thing that ended up, one program that ended up
Yeah.
being quite helpful for people, was the art of the condolence note.
Thank you. I
Was-
was just thinking about that.
Yeah,
Yes.
which
Stay
was
a
where
few moments of it.
providers can just like, after, I mean, and very often in the work that I was doing, it'd be like after someone died, the providers could write just a very short note. I heard that so and so died. Uh, I remember how wonderfully soft and beautiful those eyes were, and she had so many wonderful stories to tell. It was a privilege to work with you and your family. I send my sincere condolences, um, warmly, Dr. blah, blah, blah. And that you cannot, you just cannot believe. I mean, and it's helpful for the person who's writing it, for the healthcare professional, to kind of bring a sense of, okay, I'm through with that. I have to move on to the next thing. But it also, you just can't imagine what it means to the people on the receiving end of that.
Yes.
I
And
mean,
you
they will
you
keep those
shared
letters for years.
and you shared that really powerful story about a family who thought their loved one died alone and just right, a physician just happened by and went in and
And
sat with him.
sat with this dying man and held his hand. And this is where I would work with doctors and all, and they would all have to come to this session, and they would all be given a paper, a note card and a stamped envelope. So they had no choice but to actually pick somebody they had worked with and write a letter to them. And this guy he said, well, I didn't really work with this family. I didn't really know them. But I did go in and I just sat with him while he died, and there was no one around. And I thought, oh my
The
gosh, but
family
track
would
that
love to
down.
know that.
Yes, it makes such a difference. Now, as far as, I mean, I think, going home at night, even just making a list of so many of the challenges that you have faced during the day, if you're a provider, even just doing that is like getting that list out of your head. List is such a, as you sort of think of to-do list, but this is just like a list, or anecdotes from the day. Get them out of your head, get them written down, get them talked into your tape recorder. You will find some relief just in the experience of doing that.
Absolutely. And I always considered a little bit of humor since I didn't take the time to do intensive journaling while I was in the craziness. I would write one sentence, but I would have fun writing the most, provocative sentence like Amazon and tequila, what
Yeah.
keeps a caregiver going, and so I would think about it, would make me laugh. And I thought, I'm either going to write this up professionally or it'll be for like some crazy stand-up comedy show. But even just a one sentence to remind me, yes,
Yes.
Carol.
One thing. And of course, this sounds like such a cliche, but it's really important. Make a list of what you do for self-care.
Mm,
And maybe make a list of what you're not doing for self-care that you'd like to be doing for self-care. Because believe me, even once you've written it down, you might find yourself beginning to sort of ease into some of those things that you could do for self-care.
mhm.
So not just having it spinning around, oh gosh, no, what do I do for self-care? I took a short walk today. Hooray. I remembered to breathe when I was working with my client. Yay. What else might I like to do? Well, there are 10-minute 10-minute yoga practices sitting in a chair that maybe I could try one of those. So I think self-care is very important. And then the worst cliche of all, but the thing that has been proven to be so true is the gratitude list.
Yes. Well, what a beautiful way to end our session with gratitude, because Carol, could not have more gratitude for you and for all the work that you do with so many of our colleagues and individuals in the community. For those who want to learn more about Carol, super easy, carolhenderson.com. And Carol, please stay close with us. You have no choice because I keep pulling you into different things I'm doing, but please stay close with us with the Serious Illness Coalition. And thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you to all of you who showed up. And I hope you find some little kernel of something that you can take away from this that will be useful. So thank you all for coming out.